Personalization is really making sure that the customer walks out with the item that she wants or what she was looking for, or help her to find that item that she was looking for. It's not about having the page on the website be personalized saying, "Hi, Rosalind, welcome to this brand X." That's not personalization. Personalization is really helping the customer find what they need in a way that's convenient for them.
Omnichannel really reflects not about having the channels, but the level of integration that exists across the channels. And so you think about that in terms of what are the customer facing elements, but then also the back office in terms of the level of integration from an operational perspective.
The purpose is that one single customer that's in front of that screen, because they want to interact and make sure that it is seamless, it's convenient, because convenience is the big thing. I keep trying to tell retailers, like, if you're not convenient, who cares? And this is it.
Thank you for joining me today. My name is Gary Newbury. I'm an award-winning strategic advisor and delivery executive. I'm focused on the rapid transformation of disrupted supply chain performance across the make, move, sell flow of consumer products and services from production to porch and assembly floor to shelf. My purpose is to inspire business leaders, particularly those within the consumer products and retailing space, to think big, be bold, scale, adapt, and win, one epic supply chain transformation at a time. There's additional content available from my website, RetailAID.ca, or on my YouTube channel, RetailAID. Be sure to check these out. As the business world faces significant volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, business leaders looking to drive market-leading performance need to be tapping into thought leaders, strategic advisors, and implementation executives who have mastery of operational turnarounds and strategic transformations, together with a strong track record of transitioning enterprises to become more agile, innovative, and digital. There's great material to get through here, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to the RetailAID podcast, another exciting episode. I have three excellent guests, two returning, George Minikakis and Rosalind Greiner, and a special guest, Gail Rodwell-Simon. So perhaps, George, you can just give us a quick one-liner as to, for people who haven't seen the channel before, what you're about and why you're here.
Okay, I've 30 years of retail experience behind me. After 25 years of running companies, I decided to take a different path, and I advise private equity firms and private investors, and have a lot of fun doing that. It's much easier than being told what to do.
Okay, thanks, George. Rosalind?
Hi, I'm Rosalind Greiner, and I'm a seasoned marketer, having worked in retail for many companies, and I'm also a content creator.
Thank you. Our special guest?
Hi, thanks, Gary. So I'm a strategic retail advisor and known for connecting the dots between strategy, financial objectives, and merchandising execution. After many years as a retail executive, transitioned into consulting, working with mid-sized retailers, helping them to transform, grow, and optimize their operations. And I'm excited to be here to chat with the group.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gail. Right, we're here to talk about integrating physical and virtual channels, edging ourselves towards a full omnichannel customer experience. Retailers sit on a continuum from single channel to multi-channel to true omnichannel players. But the truth is, very few have evolved their operations to be truly omnichannel. Steve Dennis suggests the customer doesn't care about your channel strategies, the customer is the channel. So today we're going to explore how retailers can positively respond to the challenge, especially in areas including the expansion of touch points on the path to purchase, deployment and positioning of the overall assortment, the availability and temporal location of inventory, pricing strategies and branding, just to name a few of the key areas that I hope we're going to touch on during what should be a very exciting conversation. Now, COVID accelerated the digital journey for many retailers, and I know that one of our past crew members, Carl Boutet, has been having a really interesting conversation online around this. He's suggested many people have reduced this to how much of our sales are now by e-commerce as a percentage of sales, or within the retail industry, total sales. I think that that's kind of missing the point. It have accelerated their digital journeys as well as retailers. We probably might open that one up as well during this conversation. So let's explore what makes retailing fully omnichannel through the lens of a consumer. In understanding this perspective, perhaps retailers can consider the key elements to orchestrate to create a true omnichannel experience. And to help set our scene, I'm going to ask Gail just to perhaps tell us a little bit about omnichannel, because it's a term that we often use in retailing, but we sometimes may have different understandings of what that means. So, Gail, perhaps if you could dive it straight in and help us to understand what your version of omnichannel really means for this conversation.
So it's interesting to consider what makes a retailer multi-channel versus omnichannel. And if I go back in early stages in my career, I actually joined Hudson's Bay Company to launch their HBC.com, the .0 version. And it was a case of we would build it and they would come. And we were literally saying that in the office at the time. And we were the distant step cousin. And so we got loaded on our SKUs. We would check in with the Bay and Zellers and Home Outfitters for pricing, but then we would decide our price because typically their pricing was different between the banners. And fast forward 20 plus years and you look at the term omnichannel. Omnichannel really reflects not about having the channels, but the level of integration that exists across the channels. And so you think about that in terms of what are the customer facing elements, but then also the back office in terms of the level of integration from an operational perspective. So at the customer facing point, you've got, for the customer, it's about choice, right? So we walk around with our phones, have become a bit of an extension of ourselves, but the customers want to be able to have options on how they interact with the retailer. I'm going to research online and then I'm going to go into the store to make a purchase. I'm going to go into the store, see something I like, try it on. I'm going to go home and make a purchase. I'm going to purchase online. I'm going to pick it up in store. I'm going to get it delivered to my home. I'm going to return it in store. And so the customer journey, where previously it might have been fairly linear, now there are all these various entry points the customer can make. And so when we think about how you integrate to become truly omnichannel, there's 4 dimensions that a retailer would want to consider. So the first being, what's their strategy? The second being around how are they integrating their operations as it relates to the customer in these channels? The third is the data, right? Our ability to turn insights into action across the various touch points for the various customer segments that we serve. And then the last piece, which sometimes can become the shiny object, is the technology and the enablement to be able to support that at various points along the customer's journey.
I totally agree with you, Gail. I think today the customer expectation is about this unified commerce because they want to transact when and where, even sometimes now, transacting directly on social platforms for a brand and not even at the retailer. So there's even that more complexity. I think that's why a lot of retailers, because managing distribution through distribution centers or at store level has become very complex, a lot of them have gone to making the store actually like a mini warehouse where they're picking and packing orders for the online and accepting returns and processing those returns, because it is so complex now for the retailer to manage, where the goods are going, how much goods to give to each store, how much should be only online. But in reality, I think we were projecting that online was going to take over because during COVID, it was such a significantly higher proportion of sales. And then it basically normalized as people went back and returned to store. So I think the speed to which we thought that people were going to go completely online was overestimated. And I think it's kind of normalized. And that's why we have to talk about unified commerce, about discovery of brands online. It's not just about transaction.
I agree with both of you. I'm going to add a little bit of color to this one, though. I've been reading a lot about API, application program interfacing. It's growing. And I think when Gary, you mentioned the customer being the channel, that really starts changing the dynamic, particularly with something like ChatGPT. That you're putting everything into the hands of the consumer, being able to interact with their own computer, with this invisible AI or being, whatever they want to call them in the background, because it does feel that way if you've tried it. All of a sudden, everything you've both spoken about has to come to life, and it has to be working instantly. And I just read that Shopify, Snap, Instacart, they're all signing up with OpenAI and ChatGPT now. And they're spending a lot of money around this to have access, to be able to give access to their customers. So all of a sudden, everything that we've been talking about, the omnichannel, integrating everything and making unified, has a purpose. And the purpose is that one single customer that's in front of that screen, because they want to interact and make sure that it is seamless, it's convenient, because convenience is the big thing. I keep trying to tell retailers, like, if you're not convenient, who cares? And this is it. This is a tipping point now. It's early days, but it's a tipping point.
Will there be a time, do you think, where this whole imperative around trying to be more integrated in how we show up to the consumer is actually going to be a discerning thing between those retailers who are going to be successful and those ones who are still wedded to the old ways of doing things, that they may not actually exist in the future because things like GPT may actually drive them out because they're not doing the right things in terms of trying to appear on those platforms and integrating their operations to be much more visible to them. I think this is, to the point you've made, George, I think this is a real stage for this next year or two, maybe a real challenge for many retailers who are very much wedded to the idea of, we know how to do retail and it's in the stores, and a little bit of e-commerce where we have to have a website and we have some bright young things doing stuff in social media, and we're doing the adults' job over here. We're running stores. When we look around the stores, and we're recording this in the light of Nordstrom's departure from the Canadian marketplace, even a really good operator of stores like Nordstrom is struggling to make that formula work. So I'm just interested in your views around that.
I think it's definitely a point of survival for retailers. The level to which they get this correct. But I don't think that there's an end dot. Like, we talk about the continuum. And I saw a recent stat that 87% of all retail transactions still involve a store component, right? And so you've got the digital native brands that are looking at how do they stand up these brick and mortar locations in order to reinforce, engage the customer around their brand in a meaningful way. And so that notion that there's a dot that, everybody has to execute perfectly against this endpoint, I think is fictional. I think it's understanding who your customer is and being able to orchestrate an experience that is meaningful to them. And so I think about it in terms of finding that balance between experience and efficiency, right? A lot of retailers have focused on the appearance of seamlessness to the customer. And then when you look behind the curtain, it's duct tape and wire, literally holding things together. And so the ability to sustain and scale and the implications of that on their employees and workforce becomes a challenge, right? So I think retailers understand what the customers need and what that customer-facing experience needs to be. But when you're just bolting things on to the back end and that really fragile infrastructure, the things that made you successful up to this point may become hindrances going forward. It's really about taking a step back and looking at how you simplify the complexity rather than increasing the complexity.
I think that's really interesting, Gail, because the reason why DTC brands are more agile is because they've never bolted on these legacy IT systems that a lot of legacy retailers have. And that makes them very not agile to move from one platform to another. Everything is headless, with these DTC, because, everything is kind of like they can just go and put it on the cloud, and they go and they basically run their business. Versus legacy players, because I worked for Rightmans, I completely understand. We were bolted down with a legacy system. Every time we did something, it was patchwork, it was putting band-aids. But, going back to what you said about Nordstrom, even the good retailers and American retailers come in and they don't really understand the Canadian market. And really, the cost of doing business is so high here. The experience of Nordstrom was not the experience of Nordstrom in the United States. The assortment wasn't there. The online experience wasn't there. The brands weren't there. So that's the reason I think they didn't perform as well in Canada, similarly to what were the issues with Target. And then, of course, J.Crew. I mean, actually, the Canadian retailers are better going into the U.S. market. Think about, Aritzia. They succeed in the U.S. market equally well to succeeding in the Canadian market, and they adapt and really give the whole brand experience in the US market compared to these US retailers coming into this market. But I think ChatGPT is going to be very interesting because it has more practical applications in terms of, you remember those chatbots? They were so not good in terms of giving you customer service answers. They were all pre-programmed answers. With ChatGPT, customer service, there will be no humans, answering those telephone lines. It's all going to be ChatGPT, machine learning, and they'll adapt to be able to answer any question, and it'll be like a human was behind the phone. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to basically progress faster than the Meta 3 and the Web 3 and all of those things that we were talking about.
I had to interact with a technology company, and they had their chatbot. The chatbot, I kept asking questions. The chatbot finally gave up on me and said, I will have to get a human to help you out. So I thought, this is great. This is a hiccup in the whole system. And there's a lot of retailers like that out there too. And, there are 70, I think they're, in the US anyway, Canada's probably not that far behind, but 73% of retailers have a website. So there's 27% out there that don't know what to do. But less than 28% of them have any kind of level of AI interaction at all. It just tells you the magnitude of the opportunity. But at the same time, when you look at a company like, let's just pick Walmart, who wasn't supposed to be successful against Amazon. They spent, I think since 2017, they spent some 11 or 12 billion dollars building their omnichannel, right? And that includes AI. Well, you can only imagine that you need that kind of capital induction into a company in order to be able to build your own AI interface that you can own and control, so that you can build that relationship with your customer. Because my worry is there are going to be a lot of AI being sold as a service that are not going to be as effective for many retailers. And the smaller retailers are probably going to end up with something not as effective as ChatGPT. It's going to be a fast race to see who has the best systems. The bigger retailers are going to be ahead, and they're going to be able to capture share much faster than they had been able to in the past. So whatever they were holding back before, you said duct tape and wire. I've seen squirrels, by the way, in some systems. When I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, where does this go? It's going to explode. But I don't expect it to be, for all of us to be integrated to AI and wearing, AI glasses or anything like that. I just don't. But interfacing on the computer, doing searches to browsing to buy, and being able to place an order almost instantly, that would be amazing. And look, I've had ChatGPT fictionally help me buy the oven. And I wrote out what I wanted. It created a table for me and showed me all the options by oven brand and pricing. And I expect the retailer to be able to do all of that, and at the same time give me the option to buy, or for the search engine to give me the option of where to go and buy, and to be able to place that order unless I want to go to the store. I think it's a whole new frontier for retailing, It's the kind of thing that we saw, some of us who were sci-fi geeks when we were growing up, maybe one of them, all of a sudden the future's here. It's not perfect, but it's going to be quite amazing in retail.
So I definitely hear what you're saying, George. I think that's one end of the spectrum, but a lot of the clients that I'm working with are those mid-sized retailers. And so when we talk about integration, technology and systems platforms aside, a lot of them are executing and operating their business off of Excel. And so to go from Excel to machine learning, AI, and that fully integrated interface from search engine to shop floor, if we think about that, it's about the journey, right? And are there key milestones of, what's the next best investment that a retailer needs to make? Over and above the systems, there's also just the operations, the collaboration and the coordination across the functional areas. In many organizations, e-commerce is still a separate department that never talks to merchandising, right? They're building social campaigns that don't necessarily connect with the promo calendar of the traditional marketing team, depending on what drives the business and engages the customer for that particular retailer. So operationally, I think there's also that imperative for organizations to really take a step back and look at where's the leadership, who has accountability for ensuring that integration from an operations level.
They would be, those mid-sized retailers would be at a significant competitive disadvantage if tomorrow, in the next year, let's say in the next year, tomorrow is the next year for me, by the way. A generated AI is being used with some of the larger retailers and simplifies shopping. A lot of these mid-size, in particular the small ones certainly, but the mid-size retailers who are still using an Excel spreadsheet, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be in the same boat one was in when e-commerce started. So this is just a whole new game. So if you're still trying to figure out whether or not I should have an e-commerce platform and how do I build my omnichannel, you may be so far behind the curve now that there's a friend of mine uses the word dangerosity. I've looked it up. It does not exist. But there is a dangerosity to this now, that there are more retailers that are going to be vulnerable, that have trying to build the platforms to get to where they think they should be. Now all of a sudden you have a whole new element that takes you to somewhere else.
That's the reason why I think all the smaller players have migrated to Shopify. Shopify was supposed to democratize and give access to smaller brands to quickly go onto an e-commerce platform. And I think that is what they do brilliantly. And I don't think any retailer starting out should be trying to develop their own IT or e-commerce platform when you can basically buy into these bots that are investing in doing all the add-ons as they see fit. Shopify will integrate AI as modules to kind of go on, and basically you can buy the beginner package, and then there's the pro package. They have different levels. So I think in terms of today, having an integrated marketing merchandising team that is basically around the brand and not around the channel, because at the end of the day, I lived through it both ways at Reitman's. We were separated in the beginning when I first came on board. E-commerce was a separate division from stores, and it didn't work. It doesn't work because the customer doesn't see it differently. They see it as one channel. If they saw something online, they wanted to be able to pick it up in store. If you think about, retailers like Essence, it's all integrated. You can reserve it from online, bring it into their physical store, try the product, return it back online, return it back to the store. That's the expectation of customers today. They don't really care about the problems of the retailers. They want exactly speed, they want convenience, and they want a seamless journey in terms of how they can transact. I think now, with the complications of retailers trying to charge more for returning online than in store, there's going to be a revolt by customers, because at the end of the day, they want convenience. And if they see retailers like Amazon not charging them for returns, they're going to make their decision where they shop based on the convenience they're offered.
I'd just like to return to one of Gail's point that she made in her opening pitch about what omnichannel is and the components of that, and that is data. I think much of this conversation has been around applying AI and approaches and software to things which are currently being measured or being monitored or transacted on digital means. But if, say, 85% of our sales still go through the store and we're not really getting a good picture on that, we're looking at through quite a distorted lens. We're saying that look at our e-commerce channel, and some of those are transacted on our e-commerce channel, but inspired by the store, etc., etc. But how do we join these up so that the consumer is the center of our data tunnel, as opposed to we've got some of it really mapped out really cleverly because it's on e-commerce, but when they go into a store, we're not quite sure, are they shopping our store even? I think there's a real big chasm in our approach if we're thinking about putting AI only onto what we have as digital, and when that digital doesn't actually map very well onto our store transactions. We've got point of sale, but often that's without a clear idea of who the customer is and being able to link that back to their online actions, which could be a buying action, but it could be searching actions. So I'm just interested to see what people think about that.
When I worked at Ripeman's, we had CRM, we were using Salesforce, and we were able to integrate all the store data and integrate all of the online data. So we had a single unified picture of the customer. It doesn't give you who inspired the purchase. It gives you the transaction, and you can say, where did the transaction occur? How much do they buy in store? How much do they buy online? What's the average basket size of that customer? I think in terms of attribution, that's still the biggest challenge, is because you can't cookie anymore, and that took away, where we were able to cookie, say, was the customer looking today, and that same customer then transacted 2 hours later, in store or online. So that's still a challenge of the total attribution. Did they see an ad, on the highway? Did they see a social ad? What inspired the purchase? So that's still the holy grail that everybody's working towards in terms of a proper attribution model. But I do think people have integrated CRM in terms of the transactional data.
What I've seen in terms of data, there's a couple of different points. And again, it's that continuum of retailer, the level of sophistication of the retailer, but that availability of data and understanding potentially new ways of measuring the business. Right. So whether it's, are you tracking behavior in terms of how customers shop between the channels, what's driving them into the store, and being able to capture that and then integrate that into your reporting to be able to make decisions. For some of the retailers that I'm working with, it's just even the underlying integrity of the data. 5 people walk into a meeting and there are 5 different views of what inventory is today based on which system they pulled it from, what time of day they pulled it, and how they interpret that. From a visibility perspective, the whole supply chain visibility piece, there's lots of technology existing for that, but I think for retailers, it's how do they pick and choose within the available investment that they have to get that. And then the last piece is really accessibility, the level of integration between platforms. So some retailers still have those platforms separated and they don't have the BI tools, the CRM systems, et cetera, that bring them together. And so I think we're at a point now where a lot of the tools exist to get to that nirvana, that dot on the wall. But from a retailer perspective, what's the journey to get there? And how do you make your investments if you're moving from Excel-based decision making to evolve your systems and your technology ecosystem to something more sophisticated that allows you to see that unified view of the customer.
For a retailer's journey to that dot, if they have the financial resources, because really it's most of the time, how long is that journey to get to nirvana? How long can that journey be?
I don't know that we can answer that question because each retailer is starting from a different point. The ability to invest, whether it's a private equity firm, whether it's the bank, whether they're self-funded, their willingness and their appetite for risk, the organization's ability to digest and execute on that change roadmap, and then layer on top of that all of the uncontrollables, right? Changing customer behavior, changing economic headwinds or, sort of favorable conditions. COVID is a perfect example of that. For some retailers, that was, a major and probably not repeatable boost in their business. And other retailers, their businesses went dormant. Like if you're talking with business in the travel industry, retailer that sells luggage, like those departments, essentially shut down and now are reemerging and growing at a pace that, again, is probably not replicatable a year from now. So that's a hard question to answer because there's so many different factors. What are you seeing when you talk to retailers or investors?
Culture and an attitude towards change,
right,
is one of the big hurdles. Private equity firms, when they acquire a company, they will say to me, George, when you look at this company, we can build it up. We can professionalize it, bringing all the assets it needs to bear so that we can make it more successful. And they're confident in doing that, as long as they've got the financial resources there to do it. And one of the challenges often is the founder. If they've remained behind, that could be problematic because you're fighting old culture versus new culture. I've dealt with founders who said, "Oh, yeah, I know those two systems don't talk, but that one system I would say, but that one has all the customer data. That's important." He goes, "Oh, no, that's not that important. We've never used it, right?" And I thought, well, how do you expect me to help you, right? There's this cultural thing that founders really are the barrier to a lot of this. And I don't have a problem saying it because I'm not in the line of work you are. I'm in the line of work of helping private equity firms decide whether or not it's a good deal. So I can say what I want. That's why I asked Gary if I had permission. It is the biggest hurdle, is the culture that exists in the organization with the founder. And sometimes founders, it's that old saying, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Sometimes you have to force the horse to drink water because it's going to die, and you need to do this. It's a tough sell, but I found that is one of the biggest hurdles, is culture and a founder that are in the way of change.
That's playing to one of my regular themes, which is if you accept that culture is what it is and it is pretty immovable, or you experience it as being pretty immovable, that would suggest that a business doesn't have a strategy, because cultural change is part of that strategic movement towards that dot or that vision, whatever it might be. It's an interesting point you raise, because it's not just founders, it's family-driven companies who are aligned to the original founder's thought. They've lost perhaps the entrepreneurial spirit that looked for the white space. They've been successful in the past. The founders probably driven certain disciplines into that business and how they think. But the world is changing super fast. It's not just changing amorphism that says, oh, the only thing that's inevitable is change. No, I think accelerating change, and that pace of change is accelerating. So it's not enough to think that even the progress of change is linear. It's accelerating. We're having these steps, and they're going at a rate of knots now. With ChatGPT is barely a few months old in terms of the public domain, but it could completely revolutionize, not like the metaverse. The metaverse was like a geeky thing. It's like in the same ballpark for me as TikTok. It's something that, it's a social channel, it's great. Metaverse, a social channel, it's great. ChatGPT and its derivatives are fundamental to how a consumer may choose to adopt different behaviors for finding new.
You also have to address the consumer behavior, because the generation that is coming up is not brand loyal to the same degree as generations that, we always shopped at the Bay or whatever. This generation, it's because they've been spoon-fed and they've been raised on social media that basically they consume information and trends in like 15-second intervals. And something that goes viral one day on TikTok, The next minute, it's another product that goes viral. You know, they love Durf Avenue, and then some other, you know, dish comes along and they love dish. So there isn't that brand loyalty to say, I have this long period of time to build my brand and invest hundreds of millions of dollars, unless you're a Walmart or an Amazon. But the smaller retailer are much more challenged because trends come and go so quickly now. And retailers are popping up and cropping up at a pace that we never experienced before, because everyone can like go online and start up a brand or start up a retailer. And also you have the wholesale, you know, aspect. I do think there is going to be a consolidation of that. You know, the smaller brands will either have to go via wholesale versus trying to go in alone, because they just don't have the capital to invest in the technology or the information. And again, it gets down to like how few companies invest in consumer research to really talk to the consumer and really understand where their head is at. Because honestly, the most information I got was when I went on the shop floor and spoke to sales associates and consumers who were shopping in the store and asked them the question directly: what is it you want? How can we improve our service? How can we improve our assortment? Ask the customer and they will give you the answer. We rely so much on historical data, past merchandising ways, the way we do business and merchandise. I did feel some of the companies I worked for were so basically grounded in historical data and not really understanding how to move forward in the environment we live in today.
I spent 60% of my time in stores, not in the office. They didn't like it, and they had George alerts on the weekends.
Imagine marketers who went into the stores. We were dangerous there too.
You know, it was just reality, right? I keep reminding people, you know, so, you know, you want to build a brand, you want to be successful. So what's the brand story? What's the experience at the store level? I think, Gail, you said it, 87% of people still visit stores, right? And that's reality. And it may change one day, it may be 50-50, but not in my lifetime. And if you're going to build a brand, you know, what is that experience going to look like and feel like? And I just see it as, you make it or break it at the store. You can have a great GPT experience online, but the moment you go to the store to get that experience from this machine, who really was very helpful, to a human being, when you're short-staffed, or you don't have enough, you know, you don't staff well enough, or you haven't trained them, all of a sudden everything falls apart. Everything. We spent, in my lifetime, we spent millions of dollars training frontline employees, and our retention was amazing. And I think retailers really have missed a big one here, not training and developing people at the front line to make sure that the experience is great. I think all of you are old enough to appreciate what I'm about to say, is that customer experience today is not the same customer experience we had 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was live, it was real, it was emotional, you felt it, it made you feel good or it made you feel rotten. Today, I don't know what to call it. I mean, I'm going to be polite, Gary. I'm just going to call it crap. I'm just not amazed in any way. There are some locations you go to, but the general public doesn't go to luxury stores. I do, but they don't. Well, their experience is kind of cold, you know, and the grocery experience is my cold experience. You know, that you go in there now, they've got more automated machines so you can cash out because they don't want to deal with you anymore, right? You used to know your cashier when you went to the grocery store. Not anymore, because they're never the same person. The world has changed. It's not the same it used to be, but now you're going to have to use technology to bridge that gap and make your potential customers feel that, wow, they really care about how I think. They've invested in something really great here. I had a good experience being online. This thing wasn't slow. I got to what I was looking for very quickly. The AI unit actually helped me identify what I was looking for. And maybe the squirrels in the background did their part too. But you've got to get it all connected, because life is so short in retail. The average lifespan of a retail business is 9 years. I think 40% of them fail within the first 7 years or something like that. So 60% of them are left after 9 years. I mean, the failure rate is high. And very few, even good ideas, never get off the ground because they just don't have the resources or the talent to do it right. So even mid-sized ones today, Gary was asked the same question I was asked yesterday. Which retailers are going to be failing next or leaving Canada? Right? I didn't answer, but there are a lot of them.
So I think all of those points link back to your comment, Gary, around the whole strategy piece, because I think the strategy is the foundation for the decisions, the investment, the execution, and making sure that you have all those pieces aligned. And a big question that retailers are asking is like, what's the role of the channels? What's the role of the store? Customers are coming in, is that a transaction, a service hub to facilitate online? Is it more of a brand experience where they're investing in sort of high touch experiences, understanding that customers are going to transact online? Assortment decisions, that notion of the endless aisle, is that still practical? Right? And how do you execute on that? Personalization. I was at the DX3 conference yesterday, and there was a lot of talk about personalization. But personalization, whether that be from a product perspective, from a messaging perspective, from a service perspective, different interfaces. So when you go online, I'm going to personalize what you see, what gets served up to you. And so I think that's a big piece that when we think about the technology and the enablement support, how do you take that online that we can now do with AI and machine learning, but then translate that to, now I've done that and now I walk into your store because I want to touch and feel. Can the sales associate that's there, if I can find one, are they able to then expand the knowledge? Are they then able to do the upsell, to say, we absolutely have that item, but these other things could go with it, whether it's for your home or fashion, electronics. And that comes back to the training piece that you were talking about. One of the retailers that I frequent and have seen an evolution is Anthropologie. So, 4 or 5 years ago, you would see something online, you would go into the store, and maybe you found it, maybe you didn't find it, but then if you found it, then you would look for your size. And if you didn't have your size, you would speak to a sales associate, and the sales associate would say, oh, we don't have that, you can buy that online. And then I'd say, well, can I pick it up in store to be able to try it on? No, and then you have to pay maybe different prices, and then you have to pay duty, and then, and then. Just before the holidays, I went into Anthropologie and find an item on the floor that I liked. They didn't have my size, and a really interesting change happened. So the sales associate that I spoke to and asked about the size, she said, oh, let me check. And then she went to the counter and got her little tablet device. She said, oh, I have the size in stock and it's available for me to ship to you. Would you like it? And I said, well, what about the duties? And she's like, no, like that barrier's been cleared. One of the better sales experiences I've had is that in the middle of the racks of clothes with her and her device, we were able to close the sale completely. Transacted with credit card, address, phone number, confirming that I received the order confirmation before she walked away from me. And I thought that was like a really big arc in terms of investment in technology, investment of training, an interesting evolution. So definitely retailers can do it, but it requires that investment.
I completely agree. And I think that's the expectation of the consumer today. And when you were talking about what is the role of the store is all of the above of what you described, including the brand inspiration and aspiration. That's why retailers that are so successful, like Aritzia and Lululemon, their stores are an experience when you go inside. They have well-trained staff. They are able to seamlessly connect the online and offline experience to make sure that the customer is satisfied. At the end, personalization is really making sure that the customer walks out with the item that she wants or what she was looking for, or help her to find that item that she was looking for. It's not about having the page on the website be personalized saying, hi, Rosalind, welcome to this brand X. That's not personalization. Personalization is really helping the customer find what they need in a way that's convenient for them. And that is personalization. And I think that's where chat CPG and all of that technology is going to enhance that experience of personalization. But at the end of the day, it's going to take investment by retailers, or those brands are going to have to be in retailers that have that investment and through a wholesale experience. But the winning retailers are the winning retailers because they have evolved their experience to make sure that they are taking advantage of all the technology. And really, it's not technology at the end, it's sometimes just the communication with the customer.
That was an excellent 2 or 3 way kind of conversation. That was a huge checklist for any retailers listening in and wondering how they're going to navigate the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it might be for them, to really listen into that last section as to the things they really need to be starting to consider and acting on. So on that note, I'm going to just wrap up the conversation. Thank you to George, Rosalind and Gail, our special guests, to give us some great insights into what's ahead of us in terms of omnichannel, what the expectations are as retailers, how our customers are moving forward at a rate of knots, and what we need to do to try and get in front of them somehow. So stay tuned for the next edition, and look forward to having you on the podcast again. Cheers. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening today. I hope the information has been valuable for you and your organization. You can connect with me via my website, RetailAID.ca, go to the contact page, or via LinkedIn and connect with me there. Please feel free to follow the experts on this podcast for more insights and to join in the conversation. I look forward to collaborating with you and playing an active part with your supply chain and business's transformation as you are inspired to think big, be bold, scale, adapt, and win.